And honestly, I've not heard anything out of you today that makes me believe that you're going to do anything about
my government service. I don't give a damn what they say about me, as long as I'm succeeding in the mission.
For the initial item, she recited the summary, the classification, and the document citation, followed by the identical details for the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth items, with each possessing the exact same format, spoken in a perfectly steady tone, and submitted into the House Judiciary Committee logs at an entirely consistent speed. At the seventh item, Patel's primary counsel rose from his seat with such velocity that it audibly dragged across the ground, lacking any gradual movement or preliminary signal of wanting to talk, but rather an instantaneous leap upward that typically occurs when an individual encounters a deeply feared, long-anticipated phrase and reacts long before their rational brain can completely register the physical action. The seat ground against the floor loudly enough for the entire chamber to notice, prompting the presiding official to glare at the counsel, who immediately stated that he needed to protest the vocalization of this specific item during a public legislative session due to the underlying legal circumstances. The presiding official abruptly commanded the legal advisor to take his seat, firmly reminding him that the female representative currently held the speaking time and demanding his immediate compliance. The lawyer remained upright for a brief moment before lowering himself while Crockett continued her recitation, finishing the seventh item, proceeding through the eighth and ninth items, vocalizing every subsequent listing on the inventory until the conclusion, at which point she placed the document on her table and stared directly at Kash Patel. She addressed the director directly, noting that his legal representative had abruptly risen during the seventh item, and she demanded to uncover exactly what information was hidden within that specific listing to trigger such a dramatic physical reaction. Allow me to clarify the exact nature of this federal investigative directory and articulate why a legal counsel rising during its public recitation differs vastly from a witness simply grabbing a beverage or experiencing a nervous tremor in their fingers. A legal representative rises during an official judicial matter to lodge a formal protest, elevating themselves physically because an event is unfolding that they fiercely believe must be immediately halted or definitively registered within the permanent transcript. Whenever a counselor rises during a legislative inquiry, they are executing that identical duty, visibly indicating that the topic under review breaches a sensitive area they have been heavily guarding and that their client's judicial protections mandate an immediate intervention. Patel's counsel had remained perfectly silent during the initial 6 listings, allowing 6 inventory items, 6 classifications of compiled federal intelligence, and 6 summaries of the actual investigative archive to pass without a single interruption. The 7th item compelled him to rise, signifying that this specific listing involves a matter Patel's defense unit had distinctly foreseen as a severe vulnerability, a topic they had heavily strategized against, and an issue that instantly activated their rehearsed countermeasures the moment it was vocalized during the legislative session. They had clearly formulated a strategy for the 7th item, and when it finally materialized, the counsel rose, only to have the presiding officer decisively order him back into his chair. He complied and lowered himself, while Crockett persistently advanced her recitation, requiring a brief explanation of Jasmine Crockett's background so you can fully grasp the implications of a former public defender analyzing a directory while an opposing counsel physically protests. Crockett has served as the representative for the 30th Legislative District of Texas since 2023, bringing her extensive history as a public defender and civil rights advocate who dedicated countless years to defending clients in courtrooms where the prosecution's evidentiary directory remained the absolute most critical piece of literature in the entire dispute. This directory essentially reveals the existing reality, outlining the exact classifications of data held by the adversarial group, while distinctly foreshadowing the potential hurdles you will eventually confront as the litigation advances into subsequent phases. A seasoned public defender masters the art of analyzing a directory much like a cartographer studies a geographical layout, looking past the immediate terrain to understand the broader contours, anticipating hidden elements, and deducing exactly what the broader classifications imply about the massive underlying archive. She reviewed the federal agency's primary directory, concerning the high-profile controversial abuse investigation roughly 6 weeks prior, pinpointing particular listings that she felt warranted an official public scrutiny, formulating her recitation strategy, carrying it into the chamber, and fully intending to vocalize every single item documented on the page. She followed through completely, yet she realized long before initiating the process that the 7th item would inevitably provoke a significant response, not because she predicted the exact physical gesture, but because she comprehended the severe nature of the listing and recognized that any informed individual tasked with mitigating judicial vulnerabilities would instinctively panic the second those words echoed across the room. Her prediction regarding the presence of a reaction proved entirely accurate, though her assumption about its physical manifestation fell short. As she had anticipated, Patel might nervously adjust his posture, grab his beverage, request an explanation, or display any of the typical micro-expressions common in legislative panels, rather than witnessing his legal counsel aggressively launch out of his seat. The lawyer rising proved vastly more monumental than any nervous fidgeting she could have predicted, simply because an advocate standing carries a profound meaning within judicial environments, proving that the item transcends mere political optics to become genuinely legally hazardous, actively endangering a secret that Patel's defense unit is ethically bound to shield. The legislative session had been underway for nearly an hour while Patel addressed inquiries from various panel representatives, maintaining a calm demeanor alongside his equally relaxed legal team, all of whom had successfully navigated roughly 24 similar inquiries, yet none of them had ever experienced the 7th item being vocalized in a public forum. Crockett firmly announced her intention to recite a specific document for the permanent official transcript. She placed the directory on her workstation, declaring it as the Federal Bureau's evidentiary ledger for the deeply controversial investigative files, noting that it outlines the distinct classifications of intelligence held within the master archive, and stating her unwavering intent to recite every single listing as she flipped to the introductory sheet. For the primary item, she vocalized the summary, the classification framework, and the sheer quantity of data housed under that umbrella. While Patel remained seated, his legal team stayed put, and the chamber maintained absolute silence. The 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th items followed in sequence, with every single listing articulated with flawless bureaucratic precision, systematically and permanently embedding each one into the governmental logs. At the 7th item, she recited the summary just as the seat audibly dragged, prompting the upright counsel to address the presiding official, lodging a fierce protest against the vocalization of this specific detail in a public legislative forum by arguing that the highlighted intelligence remains entangled in an unresolved judicial confidentiality dispute, and warning that broadcasting its summary could severely sabotage active litigation presently unfolding within the federal justice system. He urgently petitioned the presiding female representative to suspend her recitation so they could properly adjudicate the dispute utilizing the authorized bureaucratic pathways. The presiding official shifted his gaze toward the lawyer, then toward Crockett, and finally back to the legal counsel, firmly declaring that this constitutes a legitimate legislative oversight panel, reminding him that the representative is reciting from a federal directory acquired lawfully by the panel via official legal compulsion. He explicitly ruled that the defense counsel lacks the jurisdictional authority to protest the female representative's deployment of evidence rightfully held by the panel, immediately commanding the lawyer to return to his seat. The lawyer maintained his upright posture for a brief moment, his lips parting subtly to shape a syllable that never actually materialized into sound, before he finally lowered himself back into his chair. Crockett seamlessly resumed her recitation, vocalizing the entire 7th item, moving smoothly into the 8th, and relentlessly continuing through every remaining listing until she hit the absolute conclusion of the directory. Upon completing the task, she placed the directory securely on her workstation, pivoted her attention directly toward the legal counsel, and subsequently shifted her piercing gaze onto Patel himself. She addressed the director directly, pointing out that his lawyer protested the 7th item by citing an unresolved confidentiality dispute within the federal judiciary, emphasizing that this constitutes a highly specific statutory assertion before dramatically revealing a supplementary paper. She boldly announced that she had conducted extensive inquiries regarding which judicial confidentiality evaluations are presently active in the federal system that might conceivably connect to this deeply sensitive investigative directory, firmly elevating the printed page for all to witness. Her thorough investigation successfully isolated a single ongoing litigation that perfectly aligns with the parameters established by his defense counsel. And as she placed the paper down, without broadcasting its intimate details, every single person present profoundly comprehended the magnitude of her strategic maneuver. She had successfully pinpointed the litigation, abstaining from identifying it explicitly over the broadcast, yet she definitively isolated it and verified both its factual reality and its direct intersection with the seventh item located within the federal evidentiary catalog. Addressing the director directly, she stated her intention to pose 3 distinct inquiries, staring intently at Patel, before asking if he possessed any knowledge regarding the federal litigation his counsel invoked, while abruptly rising during the 7th listing. Patel evasively responded that he routinely delegated any issues concerning active courtroom litigations to his professional defense apparatus. Crockett firmly replied that she would interpret his non-committal deflection as an affirmative confirmation. For her subsequent inquiry, she aggressively pressed him on whether the Federal Bureau currently functions as an active participant or named entity within that specific judicial dispute. Patel firmly declared that he was entirely unable to discuss the Federal Bureau's potential entanglement with any unresolved courtroom litigation during an unclassified public broadcast. Crockett immediately advanced to her final line of direct questioning. Staring directly into his eyes, she demanded to know whether the 7th item within the evidentiary directory directly corresponds to intelligence currently locked inside that ongoing courtroom battle. Patel deflected once more, claiming that his legal representative had previously articulated the fundamental essence of their anxieties regarding the 7th listing. Crockett shifted her intense glare from the defense counsel straight back to Patel, seamlessly pulling out a 3rd piece of printed material. She proudly announced that this constituted an official petition filed simultaneously with the panel, the Federal Bureau, and the specific judiciary branch currently managing the litigation, highlighted by his lawyer, mandating 3 distinct actions to be completed within 14 calendar days. Initially, it demands an official clarification from the Bureau regarding the exact framework of the courtroom dispute that his defense counsel weaponized to manufacture a confidentiality crisis surrounding the 7th item. Subsequently, it requires a definitive ruling from the panel's internal judicial advisors regarding whether the confidentiality shield invoked by his lawyer legitimately applies to evidence already lawfully captured by the panel via mandatory legal demands. Finally, should the confidentiality shield be deemed entirely invalid, it orders the instantaneous and comprehensive public distribution of all intelligence directly associated with the 7th listing. She dropped the petition onto her workstation, staring intensely at Patel while reminding him that his lawyer leapt upwards solely because the 7th item contains deeply damaging details that an unknown party is actively litigating in federal chambers to prevent from surfacing any further. That frantic reaction fundamentally confirmed 2 undeniable realities for the panel, specifically that the 7th item is entirely genuine, and that a deeply concerned individual views it as devastating enough to bankroll a massive legal battle, prompting her to slam the directory flat against the table. The legislative body currently grasps both of those crucial facts, and exactly 14 days from now, we will conclusively discover the contents of the 7th item and definitively ascertain if the confidentiality shield that triggered his lawyer's panic can effectively withstand the panel's immense investigative power. Patel remained utterly silent, cementing the lawyer's frantic physical reaction into the permanent legislative logs, permanently etching the presiding official's decisive judgment into history, preserving the 3 sharp inquiries alongside their 3 evasive deflections forever, and solidly embedding the official petition that exposes the underlying federal litigation directly into the governmental archives. The 7th item literally forced a legal professional to leap upward during a legislative session, representing a massively dramatic reaction that vastly exceeds a minor nervous shake or a simple instinct to grab a nearby beverage. That specific movement represents a highly trained judicial advocate rising forcefully because their extensive preparation signaled that the precise crisis they were aggressively guarding against had violently materialized and required an immediate intervention. Their preparation proved flawlessly accurate as the dreaded crisis finally manifested, leading the presiding official to command the lawyer to lower himself, allowing Crockett to persist with her recitation, ultimately cementing the seventh item into the legislative archives alongside the physical protest, the vocal objection, the authoritative dismissal, and the official petition guaranteed to forcefully drag its deeply guarded secrets into the glaring spotlight within a fortnight. The seat aggressively dragged across the floor, precisely at the seventh item, prompting the presiding official to mandate compliance while the 14-day countdown initiated, requiring a deeper dive into what a defense counsel's sudden rise during a directory recitation genuinely implies regarding sophisticated courtroom tactics. Defense units meticulously strategize for these sessions by scrutinizing every piece of intelligence controlled by the panel, actively hunting down the specific listings, files, or paragraphs that introduce the most catastrophic judicial vulnerabilities for their employer, and precisely choreographing their defensive maneuvers for those exact, terrifying intersections. Patel's defense unit undoubtedly analyzed this directory beforehand, fully anticipating the presence of the seventh item, extensively debating its implications, rigorously crafting a specialized countermeasure, and instantly executing that precise defensive maneuver the absolute second the item was vocalized. Their chosen countermeasure manifested as an upright protest rooted in unresolved judicial confidentiality, representing a highly precise statutory defense rather than a generalized plea of discomfort. Fundamentally asserting the existence of a live federal lawsuit, actively debating the secret nature of the intelligence hidden within the seventh listing. That specific statutory defense carries profound implications, essentially proving that an unknown entity initiated a lawsuit to build an impenetrable judicial fortress around the seventh listing, forcing the lawyer to vigilantly listen for its public recitation, since broadcasting those details during a legislative broadcast could severely damage their ongoing legal crusade. Crockett successfully pinpointed the exact litigation, choosing to obscure its formal title from the broadcast, while definitively proving its existence, thereby officially notifying the panel about an active federal courtroom battle that directly intersects with the seventh item tucked inside the agency's highly sensitive intelligence catalog. That specific courtroom battle currently faces an aggressive legislative investigation. Its intricate connection to the seventh item remains under intense official scrutiny, and the pressing debate over whether that invoked confidentiality shield legally applies to intelligence rightfully seized by the panel now sits squarely on the desks of the committee's premier legal advisors. The defense counsel frantically leaped upward to shield a devastating secret. The presiding official ruthlessly ordered him to return to his chair, and consequently, the deeply hidden vulnerability he desperately attempted to conceal now faces an exponentially heavier level of bureaucratic scrutiny than it endured prior to his dramatic physical outburst. The frantic physical rise ultimately proved entirely self-destructive, while remaining incredibly illuminating, inextricably linking the seventh item to an active federal lawsuit, a highly contested confidentiality dispute, an aggressive legislative probe, and a rapidly ticking 14-day deadline. The seating furniture loudly dragged exactly at the seventh listing, as Crockett relentlessly continued her recitation, permanently guaranteeing that vastly larger crowds are currently demanding to know the terrifying contents of that item than ever existed before the session commenced. There remains one ultimate detail regarding today's events that absolutely must be included in this summary, specifically that immediately following the session's conclusion, Crockett's administrative team proactively messaged the federal judiciary's administrative branch to officially demand the litigation schedule for the courtroom battle highlighted in her investigative dossier. That specific litigation schedule remains completely open to the public. It will undoubtedly undergo massive scrutiny. Its deeply buried details will fundamentally guide the subsequent legislative petitions, and the legal professionals who initially launched that lawsuit are now terrifyingly aware that a powerful governmental panel has successfully unmasked it. securely tethered it to the 7th item within the agency's intelligence catalog, and submitted a devastating mandate exploring its connection to the evidence currently locked inside the committee's vaults. Acquiring that terrifying awareness fundamentally alters the trajectory of the litigation, not necessarily shifting the ultimate judicial verdict, but drastically transforming the surrounding atmosphere, morphing a previously obscure federal lawsuit into the absolute epicenter of a massive legislative investigation. The individuals involved in that lawsuit firmly realize that the unrelenting gaze of the legislature is currently fixed securely upon their legal maneuvers, effectively ensuring that the counsel who frantically leapt out of his seat at the 7th item has single-handedly demolished any realistic possibility of keeping the dispute quietly swept under the rug. He desperately intended to halt the public vocalization of the 7th listing, yet he monumentally failed to impede absolutely anything. As the recitation flowed onward, the item became eternally lodged into the official archives, the hidden lawsuit was completely exposed, the aggressive investigation was officially launched, and the grueling 14-day countdown aggressively kicked off, completely fueled by the lingering acoustic memory of a chair violently dragging across the House Judiciary Committee's floor. At the exact millisecond the 7th item was broadcast to the world. The 7th item arrived, Crockett forcefully articulated it. The seat aggressively dragged across the floor. The presiding official ruthlessly commanded compliance, and the relentless 14-day countdown instantly initiated.